When you study history, you'll frequently encounter the terms change and continuity. You may even have been asked to use these terms in an assessment piece. But what do they mean, and why do they matter? This video will answer these questions for you and show you examples for how to talk about them. So, let's get started. Welcome back to another History Skills video. Today we're looking at the concepts of change and continuity in history. These two terms are quite simple to understand, but are quite frequently misunderstood. The first step to understanding them is to look at how we study the past. Firstly, the study of history focuses mostly on observing how things change over time. This is why we derive so much enjoyment when learning about the past. We find it fascinating that people, places and events are so different to us. When we notice these things, we consciously acknowledge that things have changed between then and now. This is a crucial first step in understanding change and continuity. Secondly, it is incredibly helpful to categorize the kinds of things that can change so that you can talk about them in your writing. Breaking historical events into groups based upon obvious categories makes it easier for people to identify changes and study their effects on people over time. Here are 4 of the most common categories which you can use. Firstly, political. This includes anything to do with war, power, governments and legal rights. Secondly, economic. This has to do with people earning and spending money. Thirdly, social. This is regarding the everyday lives of people. And finally, technological. This has to do with developments in technology and medicine. Now that you are equipped with these categories, it's time to explore each of the 2 important terms. Change refers to something that is obviously different from what existed before. Change in history usually occurs over a long period of time, and it's often hard to pinpoint an exact moment between the old and the new. Therefore, in order to identify change, it is often easier to choose 2 different moments in history and compare them. For example, comparing political power between the 2nd century AD and the 4th century AD, or contrasting social structures between the year 1600 and 1900. However, there are times in history when change happens suddenly, sometimes on a single day. On these occasions, the dramatic moment of change is often referred to as a turning point in history. Continuity refers to things that stay the same or relatively unchanged over time. It is often easy to forget how much stays the same over time since we focus so much on the changes. However, continuity is often more common than change in history. When we look back at the past and notice how eerily similar they are to us in their actions, thoughts or words, we acknowledge continuity over time. In the same way as change, it is usually easier to look at 2 fixed points in history and compare them in order to identify things that are the same. Now that you know what change and continuity refer to, let's look at some examples to solidify your learning. Our first example will be the moment when the ancient Roman Republic became the Empire. This occurred when Octavian became the Emperor Augustus in the 1st century BC, which dramatically changed the role of the Roman Senate and placed it in subjection to the newly created role of Emperor. Looking at our categories, we can see that this was a significant political change from Republic to Empire. However, we can also notice that despite the political changes, everyday life for common people in Rome continued as it had before. Therefore, we can argue that Augustus's elevation to emperor changed the political system in Rome, but there remained social continuity. For our second example, we'll look at the Industrial Revolution between the 18th and 19th centuries in Britain. The Industrial Revolution introduced a lot of new machines and work practices into a society that had never seen them before, which forced families to begin working in factories rather than on their own farms, which had been traditional. This event resulted in entire generations of young people moving from small country towns into the big cities to try and find work. Therefore, using our categories from before, we can identify that there had been significant technological and social change due to the Industrial Revolution. However, some things were left unaffected by it. For example, the political structures in Britain remained the same, which stands as an example of continuity during the Industrial Revolution. Now that you have a better understanding of change and continuity in history, I hope that you feel more confident in your studies. If you need further explanations, examples and advice, head over to historyskills.com and I'll see you next time.